Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Pharmacy's webinar today. I'm Tom Glenski, Chief Inspector with the board. Today, our topic is the 2022 legislative update, and we're also going to talk about some new rules along with that. Before we get started with the webinar today, just some basic slides about the webinar. You are in listen-only mode. If you have any trouble with audio, through the computer on your screen, your GoToWebinar toolbar there, you do have the option to dial in using the information, the codes and stuff provided for you there. This has been approved for 1 hour of CE. You must be signed in to the GoToWebinar under your own username to get credit. You can't share a username with somebody else. I'll give more instructions at the end on how to obtain CE. A reminder that we do not submit CE to the CPE monitor, so it's important that you save your certificates. If you'd like handouts of the slides today, you can get them in two places. On the board's website, on the left side, on the home page is an upcoming events tab. If you click that, that next page has a link to the handouts. And then on the GoToWebinar toolbar, down on the bottom there, you can hit the down arrow under handouts, and you'll get a PDF of the handouts showing up there that you can click. We do record all our webinars and post them on our website under the News, Publication, and Resources tab on the home page. It sometimes takes 15 to 30 days before we have them posted, though. We have time today to take questions at the end, so if you'd like to send a question during the webinar, go to your toolbar, type in the question, and hit send, and we will get that. Our executive director, Kimberly Grinstead, was going to join us today for the webinar. Unfortunately, she's not able to do that. So we kind of advertised it that she would be on to take some of the questions at the end. But unfortunately, like I said, she will not be here today. So our webinar is divided into two sections here. We're going to talk about the legislative session first, give you an update on that, and then we're going to talk about the new product verification regulations that will be taking effect at the end of August. We were going to talk about these on the last webinar, but didn't have time to get to them, so we've carried over those slides to this. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to do a question and answer session at the end. Since we're talking about both legislations and regulations, and just a quick update that statutes, also known as laws, they go through the legislative process where they're passed in the General Assembly and then signed by the governor, and they become law. The board doesn't have a lot to do with that process. Regulations the board does have, is fully involved in that process by drafting those regulations and seeing them through, answering the comments that come in on them. So they're two different processes, and today we are going to be talking about both statutes that came out of the legislative session and new regulations that came out of the board's promulgation process. So we'll move to the legislative update. There was a lot of bills this year that had some effect on pharmacy. Two made it through the General Assembly, which means it passed both the House and the Senate, and both were signed by the governor. They both will take effect on August 28th, so just a couple weeks away. One was House Bill 2149, and the other was House Bill 2162. House Bill 2149 was a multi-topic bill, had a variety of topics in it. But one of the things it did was it did insert new language into the board's 338.055 statute, and it's two parts. The first part deals with this language here. Both parts deal specifically with two drugs. It's ivermectin tablets or hydroxychloroquine sulfate tablets for human use. So it's specific just to those. And it says that the board cannot take disciplinary action for any person who is lawfully dispensing, distributing, or selling ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine for human use in accordance with the prescriber's directions. And then the second part of this bill added this language to it, saying that a pharmacist shall not contact the prescribing physician or the patient to dispute the efficacy of ivermectin tablets or hydroxychloroquine sulfate tablets for human use, unless the physician or patient inquires of the pharmacist about the efficacy of ivermectin tablets or hydroxychloroquine sulfate tablets. So that's the language that was inserted into our 338.055, and I said earlier it will take effect on August 28th of this year. Due to a pending lawsuit over that language, the board has been advised by their legal counsel that they should not be issuing any guidance at this time on that language. So today I will not be talking anymore about this bill, and I will not be answering any questions at the end about the bill. I would recommend, if you have questions about it, you should consult an attorney if you need legal advice. For pharmacies that work for a corporation that might have a corporate compliance department, you could reach out to them if you need guidance on how this language will affect your practice setting. The next bill that passed and will become law is House Bill 2162. This affects a Department of Health statute 195.206. That is the statute that has the naloxone protocol language in it that allows pharmacists to use a protocol or the standing order with the Department of Health to dispense naloxone. The bill adds naltrexone for addiction mitigation purposes to the statute that will allow a pharmacist to prescribe naltrexone for this purpose using a protocol or the Department of Health standing order. The bill defines addiction mitigation medication specifically as naltrexone, administered in a manner approved by the FDA. So this does not require the board to do joint rulemaking with the Board of Healing Arts as some of our other protocol language like the immunization protocol does. However, the board is researching right now if rules will need to be implemented in order to promulgated in order to implement this into effect. So at this time, I cannot tell you if the board will be writing a rule before you can do this, but this will be a new addition. It's only for that specific use of naltrexone. Any other use for it would not be covered under the protocol or the standing order. So there was a variety of bills out there affecting pharmacy that didn't pass. So I'll just kind of tell you what some of them were. There was a couple of bills that would give pharmacists the authority to prescribe oral contraceptives under protocols. That did not pass. It was similar to similar bills have been introduced in previous years too on that. There was a bill that would increase immunization capacity for what a pharmacist can do. Right now, it's just limited to specific vaccines. This was going to open it up to more vaccines. There was a bill that would revise some of the medication therapy services language, make it easier to use an MTS protocol. And then there was some bills a bill dealing with pharmacists prescribing during declared emergencies. And again, all these didn't pass. Those three I just mentioned are actually some that the board had originally proposed themselves. They weren't the actual sponsors for that, but it was language that was very similar to what the board had proposed. There was a bill out there related to prescription labeling. It didn't pass. There was a couple bills related to continuing education, some of them specific to pharmacy, some were just in general to professionals. There was other bills related to COVID-19. There was bills related to marijuana. There was actually one bill out there that would allow pharmacists to dispense Schedule I psychedelic drugs. That one didn't pass. And then there was a bill out there that actually said it would repeal the PDMP that just passed the year before. So a variety of things out there. They did not pass this time. The 2023 session, the board is already working on what proposals they're going to send up to see if they can get approval to go forward with. So, and they would be very similar to the ones I believe they did last year. So, but we'll stay tuned for next year to see what is out there. So now we'll move on to the new product verification rules. These are two rules that affect how a pharmacist does final product verification. It's still a pharmacist is required to do final product verification, but this will enhance using technology how they can do this. So the first bill is, first regulation is 2.011. It's called electronic final product verification pharmacist, because this is specifically for pharmacists. And it will allow, in layman's terms, it will allow them to use an image of the actual product and the label versus actually seeing it, holding it in their hand. They can view an image, a photo of it electronically, and use that instead of actually having it in front of them. And then the second rule is 2.012, called technology assisted prescription medication order verification, and in parentheses, intern pharmacists and pharmacy technicians, because this will allow technicians and interns to verify the work of other interns, technicians using technology, is how that was. So this is a whole brand new concept. The first one is kind of just a modification on how you can do what you have to do now already. The second regulation is a new concept, and that will allow technicians and intern pharmacists to do more in the pharmacy. It does have limitations on it that I'll go through on each of these, but that's kind of the overview of what these regulations are meant to do. Both will become effective on August 30th of this month. People have asked, how do we get copies of these regulations? If you go to the board's website, on the home page on the left, there's a link that says rules and statutes. If you click that and then go to the rules link, these are already published in the CSR. The new language is in there, and you will be able to see it there. So first, I'll talk about 2.011. This is the one that deals with how pharmacists do final product verification. And it allows a licensed pharmacist to use an EVS, which is an electronic verification system, to verify the accuracy of the final prescription medication order. So EVS is the term that you're going to hear talk about here. So an EVS, the requirements for one is it will allow the pharmacist, it's technology that will allow the pharmacist to see an exact, clear, unobstructed visual image of both the filled prescription order contents and the label that is affixed to the container. So it'll have to be an image of what's in, if we're looking at a vial, what's in the vial, and then the label attached to that vial. And then it goes on in there specifically to say, if there's more than one container, so if you got 3 inhalers or 3 vials, for one prescription, you must be looking at all three. You must have an image of all three contents and the label affixed to it. And then it also says that no further manipulation can occur once that verification is completed, other than applying the lid or seal. So the way this works is if a technician has to take the lid off the vial, takes and then has the system take a photo of it that goes to the pharmacist. They then can put the lid back on, and after that, there's no further manipulation of that. Now, manipulation does not include taking a finished prescription and preparing it for mailing, delivery, or storage, and bagging the prescription at the pharmacy. So we don't consider that manipulation when it comes to this language here. The rule will not allow this to be used for compounded preparations, so pharmacists will have to personally verify anything that is compounded. The system will need to identify the pharmacist doing the final product verification using this, so that this is currently required anyway. It doesn't get you out of recording who that final pharmacist is. And then the interns and technicians must have documented initial and annual competency assessments in the use of the EVS. And it's up to the pharmacy to develop that training themselves and competency assessments. And it will all vary on what kind of system you use to do this. So some of the questions we've received already about this is, can this be used for controlled substance prescription verification? The answer is the rule does not prohibit it. You should check with B&D and DEA. I'm not aware of anything on their end that I can think of that would prohibit it, but you would want to check with them to verify that. So yes, the board will allow you to do controlled substances if it's allowed with B&D and DEA. Can a pharmacist perform this activity remotely? The answer is yes, but you must keep in mind, there still has to be a pharmacist present in the dispensing area whenever the staff is preparing prescriptions, compounding, or dispensing them. So the scenario could be that you have a pharmacist in the pharmacy, but you have a pharmacist somewhere else who is actually going to do some using technology, this EVS system, to actually verify the final product. It does not get you out of having a pharmacist physically present when prescriptions are compounded, prepared, or dispensed. And then we get the follow-up question to that. Well, if it's done remotely, does that require Class J? It depends. The answer would be yes, if the remote pharmacist who's doing it is in a pharmacy, or a pharmacy has a contract to do that for somebody, or an arrangement to do it, it would require Class J. Now, if there's no other pharmacy involved, and say you're a single store and you have multiple pharmacists and one wants to work at home, they can work remotely from home under the non-dispensing rule of 6.055, which allows them to do certain things outside of a pharmacy. So in that scenario, yes, they could still do this outside of and do it at their home, as long as they meet the rule requirements of 6.055. So if they're working for a pharmacy, another pharmacy, or doing it from another pharmacy, Class J would be required. Okay, so that was the first one, dealing with how a pharmacist verifies the final product. And this new one is this 2.012 is a regulation that will allow technicians and interns to actually verify the work of other technicians or interns. So the rule says that an authorized pharmacy technician or authorized intern pharmacy, and I will go over what authorized means on a later slide, can verify the final order using technology assisted verification system, or TAVS. So It's using a specific type of technology to do that. And so TAVS is defined as a system that utilizes barcode technology or another electronic process method to electronically verify the final medication prescription order has been properly dispensed and electronically verify that it has the correct label on it. So it's going to be a technology most likely using barcode. That an example would be the label is applied to an inhaler. The label has a barcode on it. The inhaler box has a barcode on it, and technology is used to verify that proper label has been applied to the proper unit there. And so that's kind of a simplified example of how this would work. So the requirements of a TAVS, first, there's only certain medications that can be used for this. So it's non-controlled medication only. Controlled substances cannot, TAVS cannot be used for controlled substances. And then it's limited to only original manufacturer's unopened unit of use packages or medication that has been repackaged and verified by a pharmacist in compliance with the repacking rule, which is 2.130. So it's going to be limited to basically unit of use. Someone always said, what's an example of something that could be repackaged? A good example is bubble card, where a pharmacy makes up bubble cards in advance, and the pharmacist checks them when they're made up, and then they're later used to fill a prescription. That would be an example of the second part there of a repackaged medication. The TAVS verifies that the patient prescription label has been affixed to the correct unit of use or repackaged container. So it must have some mechanism to verify that. The example of barcode technology would be the simplest one that I can think of. And there can be no manual manipulation of the prescription after the TAV occurs. And again, manual intervention manipulation does not include preparing it for mailing, delivery, storing, or bagging a prescription. So once it's done, there'd be no further manipulation by the technicians other than getting it ready to bag or to be delivered or provided to the patient. So the pharmacist requirements for the TAVS system, again, they still are required to conduct data entry verification in DUR as they would with any other prescription. They would not actually be doing any final product verification. That would be, the system would be doing that with the use of the technicians. The records are going to have to show both the supervising pharmacist and the intern or technician who did do the verification. So this will be a new record. Some systems may not be able to handle this now. They'll have to come up with a way to get the identity of both in there. So you're always going to have a supervising pharmacist who's physically present when this is going on. And then you'll have the identity of the technician or intern who's actually performing the function. The authorize is used here. To be authorized, interns have to complete employer approved training on the system, and then they must have documented initial and annual competency assessments. Technicians to qualify to be authorized have to be nationally certified. They have to have 1 year experience as a licensed tech. That can be in Missouri or any other state. And similar to interns, they have to do the employer approved training, and they have to have initial and annual documented competency assessments. And then there is a requirement that the pharmacy must maintain a list of all the staff who is authorized to do TAVS. You recall our last webinar, we're doing away with the technician list. However, we are creating a new list for those that are going to use TVAS. You will have to keep a list of who's authorized and be able to produce that if asked by the board or an inspector. So the pharmacist must be present in the dispensing area for this to occur, except for Class R. Class R is the remote dispensing site pharmacies who are exempt from having a pharmacist physically present. But anyone else using this would need to have a pharmacist in the dispensing area. Pharmacists may only supervise no more than 2 authorized technicians or interns. And then a pharmacist must perform a 2% daily check of all prescriptions verified by a TVS. So that is similar to, if you're familiar with an automated filling system, rule requires a 2% daily check. This is very similar to that, requiring that 2% of the prescriptions checked by TVS must also be checked by a pharmacist each day. And it should be documented on that is done. Both rules will require policies and procedures on all the aspects of the system and how it would be performed. Both rules do require a quality assurance program be developed that will track errors related to the systems. And then both rules require the validation of the technology prior to initial use. I'm not going to go into that. The rules get kind of specific on how to do that. You can, if you're interested in that, you would need to read the rule. But all the rules, those 3 bullet points, both rules do require all of those. So one of the questions we received about this is, how does this apply to inpatient hospital practice? So the answer to that is, for drugs being administered within the Department of Health licensed hospital premise, these rules do not apply. Department of Health regulations would apply to those drugs being administered in there. Now, if an inpatient pharmacy is also doing outpatient dispensing, that would be under our jurisdiction, and they're going to use one of these 2 systems for that, then the rules would apply to that. Okay, so that concludes the material we wanted to present today. And we'll start answering some questions. We did ask for people to submit questions in advance. We had a few people do that, so I'm going to start with those first before we move to some of the ones that were submitted during the webinar. If you'd like to send a question, you can go to your toolbar, type it in down in the field there, and then hit send, and it'll come to us. So I've been asked before about the board not reporting to the CE to the CP monitor, and pharmacist was concerned that doesn't that automatically open me up to an audit by the board when they come to auditing for CE after the renewal period. In the past, the answer would be yes, it does do that. But over the last couple renewal periods, we have changed that. Our CE, let me explain how the audit works. We do get the information from the CP monitor. If you have 30 hours of CE or more in that data, then you're automatically, exempt from the audit. Nothing further happens. If you have less than 30 hours, we have a database of the CE we issue for the webinars. So we then look at how many, if any, CE credits did you get from the board, and then add those together. If you're at 30 or above, then you're not audited. If you're less than 30, then you're going to get a letter asking you to produce your certificates. Now there is anyone doing the practice guide exam test for CE, in the past, you still did get a letter asking you to produce your certificate for that. So I don't know if that will be, we're working on a modification to that. I don't know if that will be in place for this one or not. So I can tell you webinar CE is in our database. The practice guide exam may not be in there. So you may get a letter requesting you to produce those. So doing the webinar, you shouldn't worry about automatically being audited for CE. And since it is CE time coming up and renewal, and questions we get asked about CE for our webinars, can they be used for technicians? Yeah, we will issue a certificate to a technician. What I cannot tell you is, will your certification board accept a CE from a board? I cannot answer that. You would need to check with those, whoever you're certified with, to see if they will accept that. The same goes, we get sometimes asked, will other states take, pharmacists who are licensed in other state, can they use the board's CE for other states? Again, you would have to ask the individual states, will they accept that? I know some do. I don't know if any will not, but we do not know the answer to that. So you'd want to make sure, and you definitely want to make sure before you renew in those states, if you don't know the answer ahead of time. And then other people have asked me about board approved CE that's provided by another organization. So we have hospitals, associations, stuff like that, who have programs that are not ACP approved, and they ask the board to issue CE. There's an application to fill out in advance for that. The board does not know who those agencies issue CE to, so we have no record of that. So that you definitely need to be saving your certificates if you're getting board approved CE from another association, agency. A lot of hospital systems do programs that we give CE for. So again, always save your certificates, and if in doubt whether your certificate's good somewhere else, then you need to be asking who you're concerned with, because we do not know the answer to that. Okay, let's see. We got some questions here related to some of this is most of these next few looks like to be related to abortion or abortion-related drugs. Will pharmacists licensed in Missouri be forced by the federal government to fill medications covered by the president's executive order that was signed back in July? The board has not issued any guidance on the federal executive order, and we cannot provide any legal advice on that. We would recommend that you consult an attorney if you need legal advice. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, if you work for an entity that has a corporate compliance department, you might want to be asking them for guidance. Will the state of Missouri prosecute pharmacists for filling medications that pharmacists know or reasonably believe could be used in a medical abortion? A very similar answer. I can't speak for other agencies or prosecutors, and the board hasn't issued any guidance on this. Again, I would refer you to an attorney if you need legal advice. The next two are kind of related. One's asking, are pharmacists protected by Missouri law from civil lawsuits if they refuse to fill medications if they believe the medication could be used in a medical abortion? I'm not aware of any state law giving this protection, and I would advise you to consult an attorney if you need legal advice on that. And then the follow-up question to that is, does Missouri have a conscience clause that protects pharmacists from criminal or civil lawsuits when a pharmacist refuses to dispense medications based on a pharmacist's religious, moral, or personal beliefs? I'm not aware of Missouri having any state law that gives that protection. I believe there are some states that do have that out there, but I'm not aware Missouri does. And again, you probably need, if you need legal advice on that, you should be talking to an attorney. We have a question about, it's referring to one of the new sections of 2.010, that's the standards of operation regulation. We talked about that on the last webinar. They were wanting to know about the part that does not allow metrics that could compromise patient care or safety. How will the board be enforcing this regulation? The board can enforce it on inspection. We can be checking on inspection. We could also be on any investigations, complaints that related to staffing, workload, would be another way to enforce that. We would be inquiring on if there are any policies, procedures, or metrics that would cross that patient safety line there. I will tell you, this is, the board wrote this as a standards, a practice type language. It's not, what fits one pharmacy may not fit all pharmacies. So it's really up to the permit holder and the pharmacist in charge. The word safe is not defined in the rule either. So there's going to be some subjectivity there. But the board is looking for permit holders to make a good faith effort to comply with this. They go on to ask what's the consequences for not complying with this. Well, as always, the board can investigate if we get complaints, and they do look at each case individually and make determination if anything needs to be done, and the consequences could be no further action all the way up to discipline, including revocation. So every case is individual, so I really can't tell you what the board will do because we don't know until they actually review each case. Let's see, we have a question about can a non-employee, so say a contract pharmacist, be the pick of a pharmacy? The answer is yes. There's no requirement that the pick be an employee. So yes, you could have a contract pharmacist be your pick. See, someone's got one on saying they require their clerks. It sounds like they require everyone to be licensed as a tech, even though they don't perform tech duties. They give the example of clerks, probably a cashier on that. They're questioning why we're requiring them to have techs on their name badges. Because the regulation is it wants their title as licensed with the board on there, and their title with the board is technician. So I can't really answer that any further, and that's the regulation requires them to have their title with the board on their name tag. We have a question about for a mid-level practitioner, wanting to know, I think, let's see the question. For a mid-level practitioner, do they have to have their collaborating physician's DEA number on the prescription? The answer is not that I'm aware of. They have to have their own. They have to have their collaborating physician's name on that prescription, but they're not required to have the DEA number. Someone's asking specifically about one of the bills that related to immunization that didn't pass and wants to know when it was voted down. I do not know that. You can go to the bill tracking page at the Missouri House has a bill tracking page, and type in those numbers and you can see a history of that bill that you're asking about. So I think this one may have came in while I was talking. Just clarify, is Class J required to use an EVS? So that's a pharmacist using technology to verify the final order. It would depend on if they're located in another pharmacy or working on behalf of another pharmacy, then yes. Then they go on to say, can it be done from home? Yes, it can be done from home. Under 6.055. So you want to review that rule because it does have some requirements in there on working outside of a pharmacy. Question, let's see. Do scheduled prescriptions still require signature and date if using TAVS? TAVS, that's the one for technicians, cannot be used for controlled substances, so that doesn't apply. If you are asking about EVS, that's when a pharmacist does it. The requirement for pharmacists to sign and date is a BNDD requirement, the prescription. So that's a BNDD requirement, but BNDD says if your computer system accurately can tell them that, you don't have to manually physically sign and date your controlled substance prescriptions. So the answer would be you still have to comply with BNDD requirements of either having a computer system tell that or manually signing your prescriptions. How does a tech become nationally certified? There's two programs out there, PTCB and Accept, but Accept may be under a different name now. There's two programs that I'm aware of. There's a test that you have to take to do that. If you search for those, your pharmacy certification, technician certification, you should be able to find those websites on how to do that. Let me just clarify, certification is not a board function. It is an outside agency that does that. Wanting clarification on the last webinar we talked about, you no longer need the technician list. They want to know, do we still need to post job duties list and a description? The answer is no. That whole section of the technician list was done away with. We have quite wanting to know about when a pharmacist renews online, how soon does it update online on the web page? I think it's what they're asking. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if it's automatic or if it's the next day. I don't know the answer to that for sure. It is very quick though. It's either the same day or the next day, and it might be the same day. I might see if I can get an answer to that before we go off. So let's see, wanting to know if you're using EVS, that's the pharmacist verification system, a location where a technician is doing it, but the pharmacist is doing the verification remotely. Can non-unit of use or repackaging be stored at the pharmacy? Yeah, there's nothing that would stop this has nothing to do what kind of drugs can be stored at a pharmacy. It has to do with what kind of, well, actually they're asking about EVS, so it doesn't really matter. What TAVS, where the technician doing it, is the one in that. So I think that you may have your confused on what you're asking here. So I think what you're asking is, if you're using TAVS, can that pharmacy store other drugs other than unit of use and repackaged things? And the answer is yes. The rule isn't limiting what a pharmacy can stock. It's limiting what you can use the technology on. So we have a question about C2 prescriptions. Are they allowed to be mailed to the patient? The board allows them to be mailed. I'm not aware that BNDD or DEA has anything that prohibits them. But since you're asking about C2s, you'd be best to ask them, but I'm not aware of anything that would prevent that. We have someone asking, will CE completed through the American Red Cross count? Well, it would have to be ACPE CE to count for the board, or it has to be pre-approved by the board. So I don't know, I'm not know what specifically, what kind of CE you're asking about there. But if it's not ACPE, it has to be approved in advance by the board. Someone's asking for guidance on the new BND rule stating you cannot change anything on a control prescription. I cannot provide you any guidance on that. I can direct you to the BNDD statement that's on their website about that, and direct any questions you have about that to BNDD or the DEA. So I do have an answer now to the question on when the expiration date changes. Since you're paying online with a credit card, it can take 3 days for the credit card to clear, and that's when it will show up on the web page, the change of act. So it is not, as I thought, quick. It could take up to 3 days. Let's see, we have someone asking, can we accept C2 prescriptions from a telehealth doctor from another state if there was no in-person initial visit? I believe the DEA's COVID waiver that exempts you from having that in-person visit is still in place, but I would need to verify that. But if it is in place, then the DEA's requirement for that in-person visit is still waived. You might look on the DEA's website to see the status of their COVID waivers and see if it's still in effect. Someone asking, are the slides not advancing? No, we're stuck on how to ask a question slide right now. Will closed door pharmacy their pharmacists and techs need to have ID badges after August 30th? The answer is yes. The rule does not exempt any pharmacy located in Missouri from those. So we have someone asking about naloxone. Do you need a protocol with a physician in order to make the prescription? You either need a prescription. If you're going to dispense naloxone, you either need a prescription from a prescriber, or you need to base it off a protocol you have with the Missouri licensed physician, or you can use the Department of Health standing order with their physician. So the answer is you don't have to. You have other options, and the easiest one would be to use probably the standing order, and you wouldn't have to go out and find a physician to do it for you. Someone's asking about the new requirement that PICs be given time to review pharmacy compliance. Do you have to document that time? I don't believe the rule says you have to, but if you don't, how will you prove that you did it? So I would highly recommend that time be documented. Someone wants to go along the naloxone line. Someone wants to know, does a standing order have an expiration date? I don't know. Some of, maybe we can look that up real quick. Some of the Department of Health standing orders do have an expiration date on them. I do not recall, but we'll look that up real quick. The question, we have a question about if you have a registered nurse who's also a technician, does their name tag, can it just say RN, or must it also have technician? If they are performing technician duties in the pharmacy and they're working in the pharmacy, then they wouldn't need to have technician on their name tag too. Someone's asking again, how do you find copies of the regulations and the statutes? So if you go to the board's website, on the left side, there is a link called, it's either statutes and rules and statutes. You click that, that'll take you to another page, and on there you'll see a statute link and a rule link. Both of those will take you to the new regulations and the statute I talked about. On the statute, when you go to that link, it has both the old and the new, and it has in red effective August 28th, and you'll know the difference between, because right now it's listing both the old version and the new version. Let's see, we have the naloxone pulled up. Let's see. It does not appear to have an expiration date on it. Let's see, so I think the answer is no. The current one does not have an expiration date on it. but you do need to occasionally check that website and make sure they don't update the protocol, the standing order, I mean. So I would routinely check that just to make sure. We have someone asking about photos with licenses. Yes, technicians need to post a photo, same with interns, with their license, similar to pharmacists. That will become effective on August 30th. Someone again is asking about the new BNDD rule. It's not a new BNDD rule. They have retracted guidance that was out there based on the DEA retracting their guidance. I cannot provide you any more. If you go to the BNDD website and under the what's new link, yeah, it's what's new. They have a link to a document called Pharmacies Cannot Make Changes to Controlled Substance Prescriptions. That is the guidance they just issued on, I think it was the 2nd of August. So that all I can do is direct you there. And then if you have any questions about that, you would need to ask BNDD or the DEA. Okay, we are about out of time, so we did not get to all the questions that were submitted. Let's see. Before we close, next webinars, we do have a change of date from what I've announced in the past. Our sterile compounding update webinar will be on the 13th of September, not the 15th as I originally said. And then in October, we'll have our annual compliance update with an extended question and answer session with some inspectors. As I mentioned, we do record the webinars. Take up to 15 days for them to be posted. And previous webinars this year, we've had 4 so far listed here. If you're interested in any of those, you can find links on the board's website. So for those wanting continuing education, you must complete the post survey to earn CE credit. So do not close your browser. Once I announce I am closing the webinar, a screen will come up that looks like this. You need to click close. And then again, do not close your browser and a survey will automatically open up. You answer the questions online and click submit. For some reason, if you do not get the questions online, and we do have reports, especially with smartphones, of them not showing up, you can email us at compliance@pr.mo.gov and we'll email you those questions. However, you must have the answers back to us within 24 hours to be considered for CE. CE certificates, we no longer mail them, we email them, so be watching your email for those. It can take up to 30 days before we send those out. And again, a reminder, save your certificates. The board does not submit to the CPE monitor. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining our webinar today. And I am now going to close the webinar.